afternoon show. I'm so excited. We have a full house today. We're going to be talking about the 2020 census, and that's always fun and exciting. And I guess we're going to have Ayana Bias is going to help me lead the discussion. Ayana, um, she is the um, she's the director and advocacy and volunteer service director at United Planning Organization, UPO. What's going on, Ayana? How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we got an all-star cast here. We got Kimberly Corbin, Greater Washington Urban League Chief Financial and Administrative Officer. How are you, Kimberly?
I'm good. How are you?
And then the world famous Melissa Bird, Office of DC Planning, Census 2020 Executive Director. So we have we could not all fly in the same plane with these people. These are powerful people in Washington D.C. and we're talking about something that's, you know what, that's so funny. It's, I say, near and dear to me. The census has, I think, almost taken on a new meaning now in the age of all these DNA things where you can find out where you came from. And
Mhm.
so now we're looking at records from the, early 1900s with Big Mama and Uncle Charles, and you see extra people on there. Who was Baby Tiny, and who was
Yeah.
so and so. You see how important it is to have accurate records and an accurate history of who you are uh, on this planet, right? And that's what the census actually does. So, Ayana, you can start the conversation with that.
Yes, definitely. So definitely have to bring in the dream team. Couldn't do this alone. And so thank you, Melissa and Kimberly, for joining us. And so I know that we started working the census prior to last year, honestly,
Mhm.
because we know that the biggest concern and issue with the census is the education and awareness piece. Still today, a lot of people do not know what the census is and also the importance of the census. And so I would like to bring on Melissa just to kind of talk about the census and the importance of it.
So the we're doing right now is our decennial census. This happens once every 10 years. It is the most important census and accurate data chance that we have. It's the one time every 10 years where we count every single person living in the US. And it is so critical. This data drives everything we do in the country. It determines how much funding, federal funding, that states will get, including DC. DC will get over $6 billion every year through federal funding, through programs such as Medicaid, SNAP, WIC, housing vouchers, education, Title I grants. It impacts everything we do. If you live outside of DC, this data is used for purposes of apportionment and your representation in Congress. So it really does become a civil rights issue when we talk about representation and who tends to be undercounted. And also, guys, everything we do in all levels of government, the nonprofit sector, healthcare, private business, when we have this data, it's used to guide how we plan and budget and implement programming to serve all the different kind of populations and communities in our city, in every state, and across the country. So this really is so critical. Every single person, every household needs to be counted in the 2020 census.
I can imagine, Kimberly, historically, there are reasons why, though, it becomes so difficult. And I think that's something that is interesting. When you say, well, hey, why don't people just fill this out? Or why don't they just do it? There are a lot of things that people have, because of different circumstances. There are reasons why people are not trusting or filling out information of where
Mhm.
they are. There's some situations where people don't want to be found.
Mhm.
So, Kimberly,
Mhm.
talk to us about that and that historically.
Yeah, I need everybody to understand that first and foremost, this is just a statistical survey. It is nothing more. And all of the rhetoric around that it's really just fear mongering and
Mhm.
threats so that that leads you to participate in your own marginalization. So let me just start there. But the fear comes from the threats of legal action. But let me dispel that.
Right.
Your data cannot be shared for 72 years. All they do is they roll it up into census tract data, and it's only the census tract data that is given to the president or the Congress or the state. Nobody sees your individual data. But they want you to believe that because they want you to believe that somehow your landlord's going to find out that you got somebody extra sleeping in your house. They want you to believe that somehow, if you're not don't have your papers, that ICE is gonna come knocking on your door, or somehow they think because there's a warrant out for your arrest that somehow they're gonna use your data to come find you, or your ex-wife who's looking for their child support. That don't happen.
Not gonna
Right.
It
happen.
just doesn't happen. Although I have a problem with people hiding from the child support, but nonetheless, it just doesn't happen, right? The data doesn't get out that way. So let me tell you what really goes on, right? And I'm gonna give you just three things that they actually do to actually deliberately undercount you, aside from the fear mongering, is they do prison pipelining, right? And the gerrymandering. So they count you, but you don't count for the neighborhood that you from,
Right.
right? So they count you, but they don't necessarily count you under the race that you need to be counted as. So they end up doing forced assimilation of people of color from other countries, because there is no selection for Middle Eastern,
Mhm.
right? There is no selection for certain of folks of nationalities. So guess what those nationalities count as? And one of the reasons why Hispanics or people from the Latino community were counted early on for a number of decades as white, because they never gave them a specific race definition in the census. So uh, Latinos don't consider themselves black. We may be sisters and brothers, but they don't consider themselves black. So they checked white. So now white ends up being overcounted. People of color become undercounted. They prison pipeline you. So, or they do the same thing to college students. So they count you where you are instead of where you live or where you're from or the community that you need the resources to go to. And then you go to the systemic, the how they it's a the formula itself has a bunch of algorithms in there. So if you don't necessarily count, they still try to count you. And they try to come up with some kind of algorithm that says, oh, well, based upon past data or based upon what we see in terms of the sampling that we did in between the two decennial census, that, oh, by the way, we think that it's this amount. Well, guess what? They overcount people, white folks, but they undercount black folks, right? So I'll give you, for instance, you got a rich white person who's got multiple homes. They might be counted in all of those homes. They don't do the same for people of color, right? So again, it's systemic. I don't want to sound like this is anti white. This is not anti white. This is anti systemic oppression, right? And it is done through fear so that you will participate in your own marginalization. It is done through legal means of redistributing your wealth and your resources by counting college students and prisoners where they are instead of where they come from and where they actually live. And they do it through, algorithms that, somehow magically double count white folks, but don't double count, but are easy to get, don't double count people of color. And so you sum all of that up, and we have been, especially blacks, have been the most undercounted and the in for decades since it started. But remember, this started with us being counted as slaves and not as residents or citizens, right? So remember, in the three-fifths, we were three of the five slaves were counted in the very beginning, right? Only three out of five of us were
Right,
counted.
fine.
But guess what? The benefits for the three people who were counted didn't accrue to the slaves, they accrued to the slave owners. So that redistribution of wealth on the basis of the counting of people of color still exists today. And what I need people to really understand is your count absolutely matters. And
Mhm.
when you are counted, you stop that structural racism from happening. If you don't, you are going to participate in somebody else. I tell folk all the time, if you had $90,000, which is what it's worth to DC per person for 10 years, if you had $90,000, would you put it on the table and walk away?
Huh. Well, Kimberly, I think again you have set the table. My
Right.
goodness, Kimberly. And I think the interesting thing about now, I think even as a country, right? I think we're going through an enlightenment piece
Hmm.
where in the past we didn't really have these real conversations. It was almost like if you don't know, you don't know. And I know, Melissa, you, in addition to having to hear that from not just Kimberly but everybody, you
Right.
then have to tackle it, right? But I
Mhm.
think the first step, at least, is us having that real conversation. So, Melissa, with all that, and I think, Kimberly, what I love about what you said was, and this is where I think this is the issues that we're in as a country. It's a system. It's systemic. So it's not about you and us. It's not
Not
about
at all.
us.
Not
It's
at
not
all.
about us fighting each other. It's not about I don't like Kim what she said and Melissa. No, it's a system, and it's been in place forever. And we're starting to, and we're young. We're a young country. We're starting to be like, okay, wait a minute, we got to do something about this. So first, we have the real conversation, and
Mhm.
then Melissa, what there was a time when you wouldn't get this real conversation going on because Melissa as an organization would say, look, man, it's too much of a headache to start dealing with all this. I just want to get these numbers in. So Melissa, address some of what Kimberly said, but then as an organization, how do we move past a lot of the systemic issues that not just your organization faces, but other organizations that would work with your organization?
Well, first of all, let me just say I agree with everything Kimberly said. And I met Kimberly back in the fall of 2018 when I reached out to her and I said, I'm going to start working on census for DC government. And we started brainstorming. This has been something that we all feel really passionate about and trying to help other people see how important it is. It's easy to get people excited to vote. It's hard to get them excited about the census because they're not sure what are the ramifications of not participating. So since 2018, I've been in this position for the district government, and we have been trying to build a coalition of partners and what we like to think of as trusted messengers in the community. And I know both UPO and Greater Washington Urban League are part of our Mayor's Complete Count Committee. So they've been trying to advise this process for the last year and a half. They're also both grantees. We launched our first grant program for community-based organizations in the district just to focus on census outreach. And we awarded over $900,000 to organizations with a focus on reaching African Americans, low-income households, immigrant households, seniors. These are the folks that are going to be the hardest to count typically. And Kimberly's right. When there's an undercount, it almost always will disproportionately impact low-income households, low-income African-American households, households of immigrants, or where the head of household does not speak English. And it is like that in DC, and it is like that across the country. It is almost always those populations. And so we've always been focused on that from the very beginning and trying to, think about who are the folks that are trusted in these communities. How can we work with them? They know the communities. How can they deliver the message of why this is important? I've said it very clearly. I'm not going to be the trusted messenger in a lot of communities in DC, and that's fine. The most important thing is that we're working with our partners and listening to the feedback we get from our partners and from community members in DC. We are absolutely committed to trying to get everyone counted. Right now, we've had I'm looking at the numbers now, about 62.5% of DC households have responded on their own to the census. We have a lot of work to do. The U.S. Census is already sending out the door-to-door enumerators. These are the folks who knock on your door. If you haven't already completed your census, they're going to knock on your door. Hopefully you'll answer the door, and they will collect that information face-to-face. If you are not comfortable with that, if you don't want someone knocking on your door, you must complete the census on your own. You can do it from your computer, from your phone. It's so easy. It is confidential. So again, I would urge everyone who's watching or listening, 2020census.gov. You can do it in probably 5 or 6 minutes. It's the easiest thing you can do for your community in under 10 minutes. But it is critical. Again, the folks that are getting missed, when we look at our ward maps, it's, you know, primarily communities that are predominantly low-income African American and immigrant communities are showing the lowest response rates right now on our maps.
And so, Ayana, this is where UPO comes in. You are the trusted connection to the streets. You are the boots on the ground. You are the voice that people believe in. And what are, number one, what are the challenges you face? And then number two, what happens when someone is enlightened and they kind of, when the light comes on, can you kind of tell, like, okay, they got it?
Yeah, definitely. And so I would like to first, as you know, what Kimberly was saying, we cannot be defined by not completing the census. And so just like when we don't complete the census, we're allowing the system to define us. And then if we don't complete the census, we cease to exist. And so currently we know that there's a lot of challenges that's going on in our community. We know right now we're suffering with COVID-19, we're suffering with social injustice, we're suffering with racial equality. You know, we're suffering with a lot of different things. And unfortunately, the census is not people's top priority. And I think what happens with our community a lot, we don't plan ahead. Currently, right now, if we go into any community offering funding for the next 10 years, but it's based on a plan, no one will be able to provide us with a 10-year plan. With the census, again, the census is capturing funding for the next 10 years. And so we're looking at the babies who are just born. In 10 years, they'll be 10. I always say I have a 3-year-old. Well, now I have a 4-year-old. She just turned 4. I have a 4-year-old. Sometimes it's hard to keep track. I have a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and an 11-year-old. You know, so in 10 years, you know, they'll be 14, 17.
They will.
21. You know, so we're looking at program services and resources funding to make sure that for the next 10 years, they have access to decent resources. We have access to quality childcare. We have access to quality healthcare, you know, so affordable housing. We can go down the list. And I think a lot of times our communities were not educated about the census. Again, we talk about the census a lot when it comes around, but there's no pre-education about it. You know, there's no curriculum to teach and about the importance of the census. We're talking about everything else, but we're not really talking about the importance of the census and how it contributes to thriving communities. And with that, so yes, UPO, we are the trusted messengers. With that, we bring on other trusted messengers. And so we've provided stipends to a lot of residents within the community who are, you know, they can also speak to the relevancy of why the census is so important to them. You know, so they're going to their neighbors. We have lots of pop-up events, activities, virtue activities. We just hosted a virtue Wheel of Fortune event, but different creative ways to really make census fun and also educational, and just really stress the importance of why we need to be on the forefront with it. We all, you know, we say we need funding, and even we could just go down a list of all of the challenges that we're going on in the community and how it can be addressed by funding. I know last year alone, millions of dollars were cut from the school budget. And these are schools in DC, Ward 8, one of the most, you know, poverty stricken communities that have violence. So it's like, so how are we cutting funding from schools, you know? And so with that, just looking at how the funding that we secure by completing the census goes a long way. And what I like to tell people is that the first part, and like Melissa was saying, one of the safest things that you can do for your community right now, one of the most things that you can do is 2 things right now, as far as completing your census and voting. You know, when we look at advocacy, looking at how we can move to the next level, we have to first make sure funding is available. And then after that comes the advocacy part. Now we're advocating to make sure that the funding is allocated to those different programs and services that we need. But again, we have to have a plan. And plan one, advocacy 101, you know, community improvement 101, community involvement, community development is starting to make sure that everyone know why the census is so important and making sure that they're completing the census. And so right now, that's our role. You know, we want to make sure that from 10 years from now, we're not having the same conversation of making sure people know about the census. So our goal right now is to make sure people understand, educated about it, aware of it, and it's something that they want to do, they're willing to do, they know the importance of doing it.
Ayana, it's interesting because it's almost like I said, it's like baby steps. And Kimberly, I think this piece, like you said, it's interesting. The census to me is tied to when you talk about African Americans' experience in America. It's almost like the same thing where a lot of people with our complaints of America, we forget about the contribution that as our ancestors as enslaved Africans made to this country, and it was such a huge financial
Yes.
uh, that this is our country. We deserve everything that this country has to offer because
Everything.
our ancestors paid the price and made this a wealthy country. That's not a speculation. It's not a theory. It's a fact. And it's the same thing with the census. You deserve to be counted.
Yeah.
When I look at my,
You're right.
when you're looking at these DNA, the many ones that are out there, the thing that strikes me is our ancestors were proud to put down who you were. Why? Because we weren't even considered humans at a certain point. So our grandparents wrote down those names in that house because they wanted the world, the universe to know that we exist. And so, Kimberly, speak on that real quick, and then Ayana and Miss Melissa will get the dates worked out. But Kimberly, give me your thoughts on that, and then we'll get the dates.
Yeah, we don't just have an obligation to our country or our community. We have an obligation to our kids. So I need folks to understand that the not answering the census has already been tied to a lower life expectancy for people of color. People in Ward 8 live 27 and a half years less than folks in other wards.
Mm.
27 years less. So now, if you unpack all of that, that's because the community is neglected. It has one hospital for two different wards, right? It has food deserts, it has transportation deserts, it has child care deserts. So when you live in a neglected area, I'm not sure why you think you're going to live as long as somebody else who doesn't live in a neglected area. Well, how does your community become neglected? It becomes neglected because you're invisible and they get to take your vote, your power, your resources, and distribute it into their communities, into their pocket, and they
Mm.
retain your power and use it for themselves, whomever they is, right? But so if we don't, we built the country. Why would you hide from that?
Mm.
I don't understand why you would hide from the fact that our ancestors built the country and now they want to take what we didn't get the reparations, and now we're giving up, and now we're participating in giving up our resources.
Right. Right.
Right? It just doesn't make sense. I need folks to know. I just want to give you a couple examples. One, I talked about the neglect. If you aren't getting the funding into your communities, they become neglected. Then all of a sudden, 10, 20 years later, the Office of Planning has got some tax advantage situation that they're going to rebuild your community. But guess what? Since your community has been neglected, you don't have the wherewithal, you don't have the financials, you don't have the leadership in place to take advantage of those tax advantage programs, right? So what happens? People from the outside come and take advantage of those tax advantage programs and then displace you. And now historic communities in DC just gone. Let me give you another one. There are tons of bills and laws that are in place to protect our civil rights. How do you think they got there? We don't send the NAACP to go talk to the notorious Ruth Ginsburg
Mm.
without
Mm.
data. You can't prosecute or prove discrimination without data. So if you are invisible, we can't count your information towards our fight for civil rights and what we finally need to get. We're at a pivotal point. We are such at a pivotal point. We must stand up. We must take our power back. We
Mm.
must get what we deserve finally in this country that we built for free.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
So,
I got a little hot.
so
I love doing.
Melissa, or Melissa, Melissa, tell us those official dates we need to be concerned about. Then Ayana, you kick in on that also.
Okay.
So the census will officially wrap up on September 30th. So we don't have much time. It is possible, and thank you to Greater Washington Urban League. They are leading a lawsuit about that deadline. We're trying to get that extended back to October 31st. But we won't know anything until probably later this week if that's going to happen. So right now we're just working with the September 30th deadline. So anyone who's listening, watching, complete your census today if you haven't already. But we are hopeful that it will get extended. But right now it's September 30th. Again, you can complete the census anytime you want from your own computer at home. I know everybody is feeling really frustrated and they want to be activists and they want to vote. And this is something you can do. It seems like a small thing. 10 minutes impacts your community for 10 years. It is the easiest civic action you can take. You don't have to get a mail-in ballot. You don't have to go stand in line somewhere. You don't have to worry about socially distancing. You can do it from your home, and it's easy and confidential. And like I said, it is one of the most critical civic actions you can take right now to empower yourself and your community. So again, do it now. Don't wait. Don't wait for an enumerator to knock on your door. But again, we only have, less than 2 weeks out now from September 30th. So we still have a lot, we still have thousands of households that need to get counted. And be sure to include every single person in your household, related and unrelated. Include everybody on your census form.
Hey, Mark, can I mention one more thing?
Yeah,
You
so
know,
get your last word, Kimberly. Last words from everybody before we wrap it
okay.
up. Go ahead, Kimberly. Go ahead, Reverend Kim.
So I'm just going.
Kimberly.
Preach.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, listen. It's a simple thing. It is a survey. We take Amazon surveys all the time. You can't worry about somebody finding out who you are. All you got to do is walk down the street. There's cameras on every street corner in DC. They already know where you are, who you are. The data can't be used. Do not let them get you to believe that somehow you are protecting yourself by being silent.
Mm.
We have never gotten any rights, any protection by being silent. And for all of my immigrants that are still, in the immigrant status and not yet in the citizenship status, answer the census. They can't come after you. And that goes for all of my West Indian family. That goes for all of my African family. Listen, you count. You're in the country. We need you to count. This country was built by immigrants. It is an immigrant nation, and we need to stand up and be counted and make sure that we celebrate that we are the rainbow of the world. And we will not tolerate white nationalists trying to tell you a fake story.
Mm-hmm.
Claim it. All it is 10 questions. They can't find you through 10 questions, but they can find you through how you shop.
Mm-hmm.
And all the information you share on social media.
Yes.
Mm.
But yeah, it's important.
So, Ayana, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, it's important. Completing the census is important. It's your right. It's your right. It is our right in order for us to continue to build our communities, continue to thrive, continue to make sure we have access to the resources and the services and the programs that we offer. UPO, United Planet Organization, we depend on census data to operate what we have to do for the community. When we look at the different programs and services that we want to implement, or whether or not we need to continue services, we look at the data, we look at the numbers, we look at how many people are in these communities that we're serving. And so it's extremely important when developers come, when we're looking for new resources in the community, it all is related. A lot of people I know during our outreach, I don't think they fully understand. That's why I said the biggest piece is education and awareness. And that's why I'm glad we provided this platform to talk about it, because a lot of people do not know that a lot of the services that they receive day to day is based on the data that we receive through census. When we start looking at all the programs and the services and the community centers that are being cut, and being the schools, that are again losing funding or no longer existent, is because data shows that these program services are no longer needed because people aren't living in these areas. And so it's truly important for us to complete the census. Again, this is the first step in advocacy. I keep on saying it. Again, I'm the advocacy director, so I'm big on advocating, advocating, advocating. In order for us to effectively advocate for what we need in the community, we need to make sure that we have funding, so that these funding can be allocated to those programs and services that we need. So again, my 20, my, what is it, Melissa? I'm sorry, my 2020.gov, complete your census today. We're doing a campaign, Take 10 for DC. I'm not sure, Mark, are we gonna play that song? Are we gonna
I
play
was
that?
I
We
was
gonna play
trying to get. If you saw my face, I was trying to get it together. Let me give you a little. I'll give you a little background so you can talk about it. So yes.
Okay, so we're doing a campaign. So it's important again to complete the census. We are doing a campaign, Take 10 for DC. Right now, we have a challenge where share this song, and we're asking for people to send a video of you, dancing, engaging your community, participating in the community, and feedback. And you'll have a chance to win prizes. But again, this is huge. This is huge. You will make a difference for the next 10 years and the next 10 years to come. So again, complete your census, educate your community, educate your families. One of the biggest things that we're trying to do now, again, like Melissa said, that we are approaching the deadline. And even if the deadline is extended, don't wait till the extension because it may never
Right.
happen.
Right.
Do it now. I remember
Right.
lots of panel discussions months ago, and we were telling people, if you don't complete your census now, you're not going to complete it. Point blank.
Mhm.
So just go ahead and complete it. Don't wait for the deadline. And right now with the schools. So if I have any educators or administrators, principals that are in the school system, our goal is right now we're doing virtual learning, is to talk to your kids about your students about the census. Give them a homework assignment of, to complete the census with their family. I know we did with ours. My kids, they helped us complete the census. When it was asking your birthday, they completed their own birthday. But it is important again that we educate the younger generation, because we don't
Well,
want them to have to deal with the things that we're dealing with now. And so, yes, Mark, I know you're
I'm
saying
just saying. I'm telling you. I feel great because to actually see who's behind the movement, I have no doubt that this is going to be successful. You guys are young. You're beautiful. You're brilliant. You're aggressive, and you're passionate. And I just feel good because again, as we know, Kimberly, a lot of times when you deal with organizations and you see what's going on, you're like, I see this is never going to work. But seeing you, Melissa, and you, Kimberly, and you, Ayana, and the people that we're working with, I feel good because it really is just time. It's time, and we were kind of behind the eight ball, but when you get the individuals like yourselves who understand, then it's gonna work. It's gonna be effective. And so thank you so much for your time today. And again, any final shout outs? I got the song. I got the song.
just listen to the song.
So we expect all of you guys to have a TikTok video by the end of the day.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, ladies,
And
thanks so
tag
much again.
UPO.
Ayana Bias, Melissa Bird, Kimberly Corbin, thank you so much. UPO, thank you very much. Census, thank you much. Urban League, thank you. And everyone who had a chance to listen. We got a ton of comments, guys. We have over 80 comments. We got over 162 hearts. So people
Wow.
are feeling the conversation. And again, thank you again for those who watched us. And if you haven't filled out the census, one more time, what's the date, the deadline we need to get in?
Today.
September 3rd. Yes, right.
September
That's
30th.
right, Ayana. Today.
Today.
Today. I like
I
that.
want to see
All
those
right, ladies,
numbers
thank
go
you so
up
much.
today.
Thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That is Marc's Noon Show today. We had a great panel of amazing guests. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, same time. Take care.